YouTube theologians. You want to know how this works? So what you do is first you post a video. Hey, pastors, here's some helpful video tips. And then you post your service with no audio for the sermon. It was a good thing it was a short sermon. I think one of my elders said, that was one of the best sermons you ever preached. Completely mute. Oh, well. If you're interested, we got it fixed. The St. Paul service this morning. I don't know how that happened, but anyway. Service is up there, stpaulaustin.org/live. It was a short sermon. Oh, but how about this? It's Palm Sunday today. God be praised for Palm Sunday and the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And also this, I've been looking for a certain guy, a certain historical character, trying to find him for years. I mean years. Now let me tell you the story. I'm going to put a name up on the screen here. I want you can pause it and go and ask. I want to do a survey. How do you think this name should be pronounced? Okay? I'll give you a chance to go and ask your friends. No, you can't see your friends. I'll give you a chance to go and ask your family. Especially you should ask the kids how they should pronounce that name. That'll be good. Okay, go do that. Come back in just a minute. Okay, you're back. We had this big debate about 9 years ago. Me and then vicar Brad Lessman. Should this name be pronounced Bagophanes or Bagophanes? I prefer Bagophanes, but you just can't preach Bagophanes, you know? You're like, so there was this guy named Bagophanes. But you know what you can do? You can name your church softball team the Bagophanes. It's Bagophanes. Go. Anyway, this guy, I found him years ago, and I could never find his. I was like, I knew there was a guy named Bagophanes in the history of the world, and I couldn't find until this week. I found him again. You know where he was? He was hiding in Rufus, ancient Rufus, who tells the story of the triumphal entry of Alexander the Great into Babylon. Okay, now remember Babylon. I mean, this huge city. The walls of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The walls were 15 cubits high or something. I mean, oops. See, elbow. They were huge walls. And the walls were so thick that you could race chariots around the walls of Babylon. They have these gardens of hanging plants on the walls that were the hanging gardens of Babylon. Huge. The city was so ginormous that they had farms inside the city walls, and the Tigris River ran through, and huge city. So you think about that already, a huge city. And then Alexander the Great is going to come and conquer that city. Alexander the Great was, we'll remember, great. That's if you remember one thing about him. It's like October in the year 332 BC. And Alexander the Great is marched on Babylon, and Babylon's going to give up. And so he's going to make his triumphal entry into the city as the conqueror. And the treasurer of the city of Babylon is Bagophanes. So great. And so he makes all these provisions for Alexander the Great to come into town. And they tell the story. And so there's, for the road going into town, they cover it with flowers for miles. And then they set up these little altars all along the road with frankincense and perfume, and choirs singing all the way along. The city population is up on the wall waiting for him to come. And there's this military march that goes before him. So first, it's the magicians, the magi, then the Chaldeans, like the stargazers, the chorus, and then comes the cavalry on their horses, decked out, the Babylonian cavalry. And then comes the Babylonian army. And then this Bagophanes made arrangements to where they had cattle and oxen and all these animals, and then lions and leopards in cages that are brought in before him. And then comes Alexander the Great's cavalry, and then his army, and then his armed guard, and Alexander the Great is riding on a chariot. You got to imagine this procession going on for miles and miles and miles, with all the song and all the incense and all the smoke and all the glory, and Alexander the Great rides into town, into Babylon, this great city, and he rides to the palace of Darius, and he sits on the throne. Now that is a triumphal entry arranged by Bagophanes. Now we just got to contrast that triumphal entry with the triumphal entry of Jesus. He's not on a war horse. He's not on a chariot. He's not on an elephant. He's on a donkey. And just in case we would miss it, Zechariah tells us, "See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, the colt, the foal of a donkey." So we don't have to wonder if this triumphal entry of Jesus is really all that triumphant. The text tells us it's not. It's lowly. It's humble. It's meek. It's not a display of military might. I mean, if you had any question, you're sitting there in Babylon, the 1st of October, 332 BC, and you think, this Alexander, why don't we fight him? Come on, why don't we fight him? And then you see his miles and miles of soldiers, and you're like, whoa, that's why we don't fight him. I mean, it demonstrates his might. But here comes Jesus. He's got 12 disciples. He's got children. He didn't come to conquer the city. In fact, Jesus doesn't come to conquer at all. He comes to be conquered. I mean, that's his victory. That's his triumph. That's his exaltation, is when he's lifted up on the cross. So Jesus comes as an entirely different kind of king. In fact, I think I was reading Alfred Edersheim on this a couple of years ago. I'll just see if I can find the links and put it up there, that always on this day, the Sunday before the Passover, that's when Herod would come to town. And he would enter from the other direction, not from the Mount Olive side of things, but from the other side of things. And he would come into town and make this great triumphal procession into town and go to his palace. And I think it was Edersheim who suggests that the triumphal entry of Jesus was at exactly the same time as the triumphal entry of Herod would have been. So you see these two triumphal entries coming from the opposite side of town. But here comes Jesus in his lowliness, who comes to declare peace. It's right there, by the way, on the Mount of Olives, where Jesus stopped and wept over Jerusalem and said, if you would have recognized this, the time of your visitation, but they missed it. They were thinking that the Messiah was going to be great, that he was going to come and overthrow the Romans. That he would be obviously more powerful and strong. But his strength is made perfect. His strength is made perfect in weakness. That's the lesson of Palm Sunday. All right, Holy Week this week. Someone remind me, I'll put up the Holy Week chronology. It's good to read this week. And the services will be posted up on the St. Paul website, St. Paul Austin, stpaulaustin.org/live. And you'll be able to get the services, and we'll make sure the audio is turned up on those. And keep in touch. God be praised that Jesus is the King who comes into Jerusalem, and that we get to pray Psalm 118, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. God's peace be with you. That's Sunday Drive.